Hey guys, let's get into it. Let's talk about tonight's episode of The Walking Dead. And it's the second last episode of the season, and we have finally arrived at Terminus. It was a real heavy Darryl episode again with these hunters that he's been traveling with, and it was all about the rules and how they all coexist with one another and how they can all get along as long as they claim something. Then that means that there's really no infighting, because once you follow the rules with this group, then you're good to go. And Darryl quickly finds out that if you break these rules, then that means death. And so there was a guy who was trying to basically kind of one up Darryl. And, he's another guy who's good with a crossbow. And Darryl went to go try to find some food and he shot a rabbit. And then this guy came over and claimed that he claimed the rabbit first. And this led to a whole big explanation as to how all these guys get along with one another and how they follow the rules. And if you don't follow the rules, then there are basically consequences. And Darryl's just trying to say, listen, I'm not with you guys. At this point, I guess I'm just moving along with you, but I'm not with you. So I don't really care about what your rules are because it's never going to really apply to me. And when this guy tries to set Darryl up and say that he stole the half of the rabbit that was meant for him, the leader of this group, I believe his name is Joe, basically tried to call him out and ask, Darryl, are you lying or is this guy lying? And then, of course, we all know that the other guy was lying. And what do? They make an example of him and they basically beat him to death. And Darryl walks out of the room and he sees his dead body laying on the ground. And of course, because Darryl still is Darryl, he was about to take a tarp and throw it over top of him just to, sort of give his body a little bit of respect. And then at the last second, he was just like, whatever. And he threw the tarp on the floor and then just continued walking on. And again, it's just one of those things where you just see parts of these guys and their soul is just getting chipped away at every single day. And, this guy really tried to get under Darryl's skin, but ultimately it didn't work. So we only had a very brief glimpse of my favorites on the show, Rick, Carl, and Michonne. And I think it was a really good scene that they actually had them in, because you just got once again to see the dynamic between Carl and Michonne and how much they have grown on one another and how much I think that they have this deep bond. And even Rick is noticing it and he's happy about it, because at the end of the day, Michonne will always be sort of like this big sister or motherly figure that Carl can look up to. And I think that that makes Rick happy because, one, he knows that Michonne will never leave him. She knows he will never betray him. And if anything happens to Rick, that Carl will always have Michonne. And I think that that sort of gives him comfort. So he really didn't even say much in this scene. He just was looking at the two of them, playing around on the train tracks. And then ultimately, Michonne losing the bet and Carl taking the chocolate bar and then splitting it in half and just saying, we always share everything. And so it just goes to show how close they've gotten in these last, even when we haven't seen them obviously on screen, because this is like episode 4 and we really got like a 5-minute scene with them. I feel like these back episodes ever since the mid-season finale, we have just gotten no Rick, no Carl, and no Michelle. I mean, we had like that one really heavy episode right after the break, but then it's sort of been like kind of quietsville between these guys. So anyways, I really did enjoy that scene and I thought it was a good one. And then we had a lot going on with Glenn. And of course, he is with Abraham and Eugene and Rosetta and then with Tara. And of course, they're still trying to find Maggie. And there's a moment when Abraham is trying to say to Tara, listen, I know that I may be getting this wrong, but you might have feelings for Glenn. And we all know at the end of the day, she's into women. But it's more about the responsibility she feels to helping Glenn out because of her responsibility in what happened at the prison. And they have a really nice conversation when they're walking through the tunnel after Eugene and Abraham and Rosetta leave them. And, she's basically once again just saying she feels like she has to help because of what happened. And she saw her niece die, she saw her sister like basically gutted. And what really cemented it all though was when was when what's his name was beheaded, and how devastating that was. And Maggie's father, of course, that's who I'm talking about. But that was sort of when she realized, that there was no turning back, and so she feels a sort of, she's indebted now. Like, she feels like she has to help Glenn out no matter what, however it turns out. So I thought that was a good conversation that they had. And Glenn obviously doesn't know what happened because he was inside the prison. He did not see what happened. So, he can only just imagine the devastation and what actually went down. So, once they get to that tunnel, that was kind of a crazy, intense scene when you see that. I guess it looks like the ceiling had collapsed in, and it collapsed on all these walkers. And this whole time, Glenn and and Abraham and them have been following Maggie's signs saying, "Follow us to Terminus. I'm with Bob and I'm with Sasha." So when they get into the tunnel and Glenn's looking at all the zombies and he's trying to see if Maggie's one of them, and he gets a little bit more hope because he realizes that they got through, so there has to be a way for them to get through. So they try to create this diversion, and they try to climb around on the other side. And then, of course, this is when Tara slips and the big old rock falls on her leg. And it's like, oh my God, here we go. And it's just like, the walkers are going to come. And it's just like, oh my God. And at the same time, when Abraham, Eugene, and Rosetta left, they found a car. They were driving around. And there was this whole scene when they were talking about directions and this and that. And I was like, okay, what's the point of this scene? And of course, Eugene wanted to take control so that he could steer Rosetta back over to the train tracks, because he mentally figured that if they had been walking this amount of speed and blah, 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 this is where they would be around. So Eugene just definitely didn't want to turn his back on Glenn and Glenn and Tara. So that was obviously very good to see. And there's this moment when there's all this bickering going on in the car, and Eugene's like, guys, like, and then they all look up and they have like this look of shock on their face, and you don't really see who or what is in front of them. And then in that moment when Glenn is being attacked by the zombies, when Tara's leg is caught, you're just like, oh God, here we go. Like, he's toast. And then you hear this car come through the tunnel, and you see everybody standing there with the machine guns going off, and yay, it's the happy reunion between Maggie and Glenn. And it was a good reunion, because at the very beginning of this episode, when he sees that sign and it says, follow us to Terminus, like, that's where we are, and Glenn just takes off running. It's like, at the end of the day, this is his wife, and he loves her more than anything, and he has already been willing to leave those other people behind, go on his own. He even gave up his prison guard stuff, like that was the bulletproof vest, and he gave that up to Eugene. He was like, listen, if you guys come with me, I'll give you this. Like, he just doesn't care. He just wants to get to Maggie. And like we've all been saying, because even Eugene basically said it again, I want to be a person that I can actually respect when I save the world. Like, I don't want to know that I saved the world, but I was willing to kill all these humans or leave people behind to do it. So that's exactly what's sort of been driving Glenn. It's like, what's the point of saving this world if I'm not with the woman that I love? So that reunion scene was awesome. And then, of course, this is when the rest of them, Sasha and Bob, find out that Eugene is actually somebody, he's a scientist, and he knows what caused this whole zombie apocalypse in the first place. And of course, they're saying that they will go with them to Washington, but they want to see Terminus first, because of course Sasha wants to see if her brother's still alive. And the other people are like, maybe we can get some supplies and we can gather more people and we can head out on this mission. So there we go. They're off and they're running to Terminus. And when they finally arrive, it's like there's flowers and there's, vegetables, and it's like, what are we walking into? And it's like in this caged off area, and it's almost like it's just way too good to be true. There's this woman, her back is to the audience, and there's a barbecue, what looks to be a barbecue, and she turns around and she sees the group of them, and she's like, oh, you look like you've been traveling a long time or something like that. And she's like, well, let's get you guys settled, and basically welcome to Terminus. And you're just kind of like, is this like dun dun dun, or is this gonna be like songbirds playing? And I just don't know. And even when Darryl was on the road with Joe, I keep forgetting his name. they see the sign for Terminus and they're like, oh, we're close. And he's like, is this where we're going? And then he explains the story about what happened in the house with Rick. And of course, he doesn't know that Darryl knows who Rick is, and they don't even know that they know who Rick is, but they are on a mission to find Rick and basically have him meet his maker, because the guy who was being choked by the leader passed out, but before he passed out, he saw Rick's face, so he knows what he looks like. Oh gosh. And so they're on their way. They see the chocolate bar on the ground, like you see the chocolate bar wrapper, so you know that they're not far behind Rick and Michonne and Carl. Oh my goodness, I don't want to see when that reunion happens. And then of course we already know that Carol and Tyrese are on their way there with baby Judith. So should be very interesting, and hopefully we all get this reunion, whether it's good or bad or ugly. At least we all end up in the same place by next week's season finale. I feel like, the show came out with a really big bang after the mid-season finale, and then we've had some good episodes and we've had some, sort of like slower episodes, and there's always sort of that element of danger all around, which is good. But I feel like the show has lost. I mean, don't get me wrong, last week's episode was unbelievable, and I don't know how they were going to follow that up with tonight's episode. And I feel like tonight's episode was good. It wasn't obviously as like heart pounding or devastating as last week's episode was, but I just don't know what could top that. But that being said, I'm really excited to see where we go in the season finale. And hopefully we get some really good, juicy material, because it needs to end on a really big bang, in my opinion. Let me know what you guys thought of this episode. There were a lot of little moments that worked for me in this episode. And we got a lot of conversation with Eugene, and just sort of hearing him talk and like how smart he is and stuff like that, and talking about the making a battery or with the coin that Tara found. And so I have a feeling that that might play into something later on down the road. But yeah, and also I was going to say, when Darryl and that guy Joe were talking and he said, Terminus, please, I don't think they're going to welcome us there. So who knows what's going to happen when they arrive. Oh my gosh, it just doesn't sound like it's going to be good news. And still, where is Beth? Because we have not heard a glimmer of her. We haven't seen anything. Obviously, these hunters are not the ones who took her. So who did? Okay, we're getting down to it, guys. Let me know what you thought and leave a comment down below. And I'll see you next week for the finale. Bye.